Hi everyone, my name is Diana McAlintoll.
And I'm Nick Wagner.
And we are Team RCIA. And as predicted, things are changing yet again in this development of the coronavirus. And yesterday, the Vatican issued directives regarding the celebration of the Paschal Triduum.
So we wanted to kind of go over that with you. The things that they covered in the directive that we're going to talk about today are the date of Easter, the Chrism Mass, implications for the Paschal Triduum.
And also some other issues that might affect other communities as well. And so we're going to look through each of those.
So kind of right off the bat, really important is the date of Easter. There has been some rumblings on social media about possibly moving the date of Easter, and only the Pope can make that decision, and the Pope has decided not to move the date of Easter.
And I think that's a wise idea, not just because the Pope can make that decision, but also because the date of Easter is so central to so many of the other solemnities in the liturgical year. For example, the beginning of Lent is determined by the date of Easter. The date of Pentecost is determined by the date of Easter, and so many other things. And so it shows how central and significant that moment in the calendar is, and simply moving it disconnects it from all of the other solemnities that are determined by it.
The Chrism Mass, however, is not so intricately linked to the calendar, and so that can be moved to another date. And so this directive allows bishops to move the Chrism Mass to a later date if necessary.
So let's take a look at some of the directives for the Paschal Triduum. Now, the Vatican is very clear that the directives that we're going to talk about here are only for those places where there have been restrictions already set by local dioceses and government officials. Now, you might not have any restrictions today, but that may change tomorrow, that may change next week.
Yep.
And so everything is very fluid right now, but at least we have these guidelines from the Vatican to let us know how to celebrate the Triduum if there are restrictions in your local area.
And keep in mind that the Vatican is dealing, the Pope is dealing with the worldwide church, and the Vatican is physically located in Italy, where probably the worst impact on a nation about this coronavirus is taking place. And so they have all that they're filtering this through. But these directives are for the worldwide church, as Diana said, specifically in those places where there are restrictions on how many people or who can gather in public gatherings.
And so the first directive that the Vatican gives us for those places where there are restrictions is that bishops with their local conference of bishops will send directives regarding the celebration of the Triduum in cathedrals and in parishes where it can be celebrated, but without the physical presence of the participation of the faithful.
So kind of I think what the point of this part of the directive is that the Pope wants to ensure that we are in fact celebrating the Triduum, at least in the cathedral parishes in our diocese, even if the faithful cannot physically be present, that we have some celebration of the Triduum everywhere in the world.
And we'll put a link to the actual text so that you can read it and interpret it for yourself. But they're always very clear that this is to be done where it is possible to do.
Yes.
So again, if things change and it is impossible
Right.
to even do that in the cathedral, then we have to figure out what the next step is for that. But for now, where it is possible, the celebrations of Triduum can happen in the cathedral and in parishes, but only with the bishop and the parish priests.
And the directive goes on to say that bishops and pastors should let people know the times of these celebrations, which is, seems obvious, but just as a way of saying that the Pope has not forgotten us, and the Pope wants us to be in prayer during the moments when perhaps your bishop is celebrating the Triduum in the cathedral. So you want to get those times from either your local parish, if they'll be doing it, or your cathedral parish, and schedule your family, your domestic church, your household church around those times, so you have prayer going on in the home when these rituals are being celebrated.
And to help you do that, the Pope has asked that your local diocese and your bishops' conferences provide resources to help households pray and unite themselves in prayer during that time. Another really important thing that the Vatican has said specifically, which I think is something brand new, is that they acknowledge that televised masses and live streamed masses, as long as they are live, meaning not recorded, not pre-recorded, but actual live broadcasts that are happening at that very moment, can be helpful to keep households in prayer and to help them unite in prayer with their priests.
We have seen, in places where Sunday Mass has been suspended, that some places are kind of pre-recording the Sunday Mass. And I don't know how you feel about that, but at least when it comes to the Triduum, the Pope is saying we cannot do that. It's got to be a live, taking place. Holy Thursday Mass has to happen at the usual time, Good Friday Veneration usual time, Easter Vigil at the usual time.
Okay. So let's take a look at some specifics for each day of the Triduum, starting with Holy Thursday.
So in cathedral parishes, again, and this directive says this over and over again, where it is possible, and it also says established by the one responsible, and I think that means the bishop in most places, but there are a few places where there is no bishop, he's retired or ill or died. So whoever's responsible, who's ever in charge of the diocese right now, and where it's possible, priests of the parish should celebrate, or the cathedral parish should celebrate the Holy Thursday liturgy, again, without the physical presence of the people. For priests that cannot celebrate the evening Mass of the Lord's Supper for whatever reason, they should celebrate Vespers instead.
Mm-hmm. And at those celebrations of the evening Mass of the Lord's Supper, the priests or the bishop would omit the washing of the feet, and the procession of the Blessed Sacrament would also be omitted. That usually takes place at the end of that liturgy. And the Blessed Sacrament would remain in the tabernacle instead of being placed in a chapel of repose. And so again, these are directives for places where there are already restrictions for gathering, and these are, having looked at the Holy Thursday, the determination of how these happen is made by those who are in charge, namely your local bishop, but sometimes each individual parish, depending on the local situation, might need to make determinations for them, their own parish.
That's a good point.
Regardless of what's happening in the diocese, for the health and safety of the local people. So there may be instances where that is required, but we have to work together, not just for the good of our own individual homes and parishes, but for the good of the entire diocese and the local community.
In the Good Friday liturgy, nothing is omitted, but again, the document emphasizes where it's possible. And we're going to celebrate the Good Friday liturgy, the Passion of the Lord. But the Vatican has asked, the Pope has asked that in the prayer of the faithful, in the universal prayer, that the bishop would ensure that there is special mention of the sick, the dead, and those who feel lost or dismayed. So to make sure those get emphasized in the intercessory prayer for Good Friday.
And that's already a norm. If you take a look at the great intercessions for Good Friday, there is the final intercession. There is one where your local bishop would offer an intercession for the local community. And so this is a simple place where that would be included. And remember that these are liturgies where the people are not present, not physically present, but united in prayer with the bishops and priests who are celebrating the Passion of the Lord.
And then we move to Easter Sunday, the Easter Vigil. And so again, where it's possible to do so, we're going to celebrate the Easter Vigil without the gathering of the people. And so there'll be the preparation and lighting of the candle, but there will be no paschal fire. That's omitted. Then also the procession with candles is omitted, And so after you have the lighting of the candle, I'm presuming since there's no fire, this is taking place inside the parish church.
Can we start again at the Easter Vigil? Because it wasn't clear here. We have to light the candle still. We don't do the fire and the preparation.
Said that.
No, you didn't say that part.
Well, when you play it back, check, because I think I said that.
Okay. So start with Easter Sunday, Easter Vigil.
Then moving on to Easter Sunday, the vigil of Easter, the Easter Vigil, again, in places where it's possible, the priest is going to celebrate the Easter Vigil. We're going to begin by lighting the Paschal candle. There will be no lighting of a Paschal fire. That the fire is omitted. So because of that, I'm presuming this begins in the worship space, since there's no reason to go outside. The procession with the candle is omitted also, and so and
the preparation of the candle as well, the inscribing,
yes,
and the incense grains.
Right.
So none of that, none of the preparation
right.
of the candle, the lighting of the fire.
Just light the candle.
Yes.
And then no procession. So we're going to light the candle, and then the Exultet follows right after that. And
which I think is very important, because the Exultet is the heart of our praise to Christ the light.
Mm-hmm.
And so I am so glad that was not omitted, as long as it can feel when those times when we're praying it, but it is such a significant part of our proclamation of praise for Christ.
And then the liturgy of the word would follow, quote unquote, normally. And then for the baptismal liturgy, there won't be any actual baptisms because, the faithful are not gathered there, the elect are not there. So for this part of the liturgy, all that's required is the renewal of baptismal promises. There's no blessing of the font and there's no sprinkling indicated.
Now, those blessings of the font and the sprinkling, it's not specifically said in the Vatican directives. The Vatican directive simply says the renewal of baptismal promises is the only requirement necessary, and so we're just assuming that means priests do not sign themselves with the water or bless the font. And so that is an assumption, but I think it's a reasonable assumption.
Yep, and then the liturgy of the Eucharist would follow that. So again, those priests who cannot join in this celebration at either the cathedral church or the local parish church, they would pray the office of readings. Now, the document says those who cannot celebrate the vigil in the church. It doesn't say the priests specifically. I think because it goes on to say they would celebrate the office of readings, I think they mean the priests, but we lay folks can also celebrate the office of readings. So that's an option for us as a way of marking the Easter Vigil or Easter Sunday in our homes.
And throughout all of the Triduum days, the days of Triduum, in your own homes, in your own personal private prayer, make use of the divine office. So these are the Liturgy of the Hours, morning and evening prayer, noontime prayer, nighttime prayer, as well as the office of readings. If you've never explored the breviary that might be sitting on your shelf, turn to the back of the breviary for the office of readings, and as well as readings from saints and other teachers of the church, and even hymns and songs and canticles back there.
We've been told that our friends at Liturgical Press are going to be putting together some resources for the domestic church to celebrate home liturgies over the Triduum. If that happens in time, we'll put links to that in this post as well.
And I know that many other publishers are being very generous with their resources and time, and providing so many other free resources, even online retreats, live stream prayer services, evening prayer, morning prayer. And so make use of those. Even though we are physically distant, we can be spiritually united with one another in this prayer.
And when we gather as the domestic church, as a home church, to pray and to worship, to proclaim the readings, to do the rituals as fully as we can when we celebrate Liturgy of the Hours, all of that is official liturgy of the church, and it calls for the full conscious and active participation of the faithful in those liturgies. And the church teaches that Christ is really present in those liturgies. So it's not like we cannot celebrate the Triduum. We just can't do it in the fullest way possible that we're used to. But we still can celebrate the Triduum in our homes in a liturgical, sacramental way in our communities.
So exercise your baptismal priesthood, church.
Yeah.
Because
Sacrament with a small
you
s. but,
can.
Yeah.
Let's just take a quick look at some of the other items that the Vatican directive included. The directives that are given for monasteries, seminaries, and religious communities will be determined by the local bishop of those areas, and so pay attention to that. And finally, the Holy Week doesn't just include the Triduum liturgies, but all of the other ways that we pray as a church, as different communities, expressions of popular piety, of devotions are so rich during Holy Week, and the Vatican does not want us to lose those. And so they're encouraging that if the diocesan bishop determines that this would be beneficial for his diocese, that those kinds of popular piety expressions and prayers continue. So Stations of the Cross, processions of the cross, any kinds of rosaries or things that you would normally do during Holy Week, celebrate those at a later time in the year. The Vatican gave some beautiful suggestions for when this might happen, specifically September 14 and 15. September 14 being the exaltation of the Holy Cross, and September 15 being Our Lady of Sorrows. And so these are wonderful ways if you do live Stations of the Cross, and assuming that we are all healthy and somewhat back to a renewed sense of normal by that time, those would be wonderful expressions of our faith in the cross and in the resurrection.
Now, this directive didn't deal at all with the baptism of the elect or any of the baptismal rites and how to handle that. We did create a video a couple of days ago about that. We'll link to that to give, if you have elect, what to deal with, how to deal with them of doing baptism outside the usual times. Mm-hmm. Also, you want to pay attention to your diocesan guidelines. Some dioceses have already issued guidelines. Some are in the process of creating them. So check your diocesan website and see what your diocese recommends, says to do in relation to the celebration of the Triduum in domestic churches and the celebration of baptism outside the usual times.
So again, pay attention, be flexible, be patient, because things are changing very quickly. But also, as part of the things that are changing, we're also seeing a real beautiful change in our the sense of the common good and the care that everyday people are having for one another, especially those who are most in need. And so keep doing that. Keep being a Eucharistic people, even though so many of us cannot gather around the Eucharistic table, because the fullest expression of what we say in our baptismal rites, in our Eucharist, in the celebration of the Paschal Mysteries at the Triduum, is lived out in how we treat one another, especially those most vulnerable. So that is a wonderful way for us to be a Eucharistic Paschal people during this very unusual and extraordinary time.
So we're praying for all of you. Please pray for us. We're going to get through all this, and it will be back to normal someday. But right now we're in that liminal transitional time. And so there's grace in that. We just have to be patient, be prayerful, be holy, be kind to one another.
Wash your hands.
Wash your hands.
All right, friends.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.